In this installment, we will cover creating a base calibration file for your Electromotive system. The first step is to open your Wintec 4 software and select the New tab at the top of the screen. This will bring up the General Engine Configuration page, also known as the Tuning Wizard. First step is to select your unit. At this point, select your engine type. Engine type also includes how you wired your fuel injection. In this case, we'll select a 4-cylinder, 4-stroke sequential option. The next field is the maximum engine RPM, or maximum engine rev limit. This value is used to establish your base fuel curve. It also sets the maximum RPM point on your VE and ignition tables, as well as your rev limiter. Those can be changed at a later time if needed. The next field, which is not adjustable, is the maximum controllable pulse width. This value represents in milliseconds the maximum amount of time the injectors can stay open with an 80% duty cycle. The next field is the TOG, or time for 1 gamma. We'll cover this field in more detail in another video, but this field represents in milliseconds how much fuel the system will produce at 5 volts map signal. The next field is the injector offset time. This field will stay 0 at this time, and we'll go over it along with TOG in another video at another time. The next field is the minimum injector turn-on time, or MIT. This represents, in milliseconds, the lowest pulse width that the software will allow the injectors to operate at, in the event that the fuel table tries to take the injectors below their operating range. These can be determined either by trial and error or from data supplied by the injector manufacturer. The next field is TPS fully closed throttle voltage. If you happen to be connected to your tech unit and communicating, you can fill this in now by taking a look at the throttle position voltage. If you're not connected to the unit, this can be done at a later time. The next field is camshaft style. There's 2 options, street stock or race high performance. Selecting race high performance will preset your TPS map blend function, which will be covered in another video. Street stock leaves TPS map blend turned off. Map sensor installed. You can select a map sensor from our list of pre-calibrated sensors, or if you're using a sensor not listed here, you can use the Manage Sensor option to create a new sensor. You will need the low and high voltage to pressure calibration sheet for the sensor you're using. Max boost pressure is measured in kPa and represents pressure above atmosphere. In this case, since the engine is naturally aspirated, we'll leave the pressure at 0. Number of injectors represents the physical number of injectors you're using in the vehicle. This will also be used to calculate your base fuel curve. Estimated brake horsepower represents the maximum flywheel horsepower of the engine you're tuning. Since you may not know the flywheel horsepower of the engine, use an educated guess to help determine a fuel curve. The closer you are, the closer the base settings are going to be. If the engine is alcohol fueled, check this box here. If not, leave it unchecked. When you select the pound-hour field, the value shown will be a recommended injector size based on the information that you've entered in the above fields and 80% duty cycle. It may not represent your actual injectors. Overwrite the field with the actual injector size being used. After you've entered all the information in the fields, WinTech calculates a starting tog. This value should be entered in this field here, and rounding to the nearest tenth is fine. Once you've entered that, you can create the bin file. Enter a name for your file, and save the file. Once the file has been saved successfully, your Advanced tab on your software will appear. This is where you make your adjustments in WinTech 4. The first thing we want to do is make any adjustments to the trigger wheel offset. These would include any deviation from the 11th tooth after the missing tooth section on the trigger wheel. These may be the result of using a stock trigger wheel and sensor that does not align with Electromotive's default 11th tooth. Also, if you've purposely built in any mechanical offset into the trigger wheel to aid in starting, you can make those adjustments here as well. If your trigger wheel aligns with something other than the 11th tooth after the missing tooth section, enter that tooth value here. If you have purposely advanced the trigger wheel upon installation to give the system a little bit of additional advance during cranking, you can set the mechanical offset by the amount of degrees of advance that you've built in here. Now we can go to the sensor parameters and set our TPS low-high throttle voltage with the unit connected to the vehicle. You can also take this opportunity to turn the MAT sensor on if you have one in the vehicle. By default, Electromotive has the MAT sensor turned off. Take a look at your ignition advance table and make sure the default settings are in line with what the engine is going to want. Start conservatively and make changes before you program the unit to reflect the advance you want to start with. Usually the base settings can be used as a starting point. Once you've verified these base parameters, you can save the changes you've made, connect your tech unit to the Make sure you've established communications with the unit, and program the tech. Once the unit is programmed, you should be able to start your vehicle. Don't expect the base program to be ready to go driving down the road. It should, however, be sufficient to start the vehicle and verify that all your connections, your injector wiring, and your coil wiring are correct. Once you've verified this, you can proceed to tuning your Electromotive system.